There we go. Great. All right. Again, so welcome. I'm really excited for this open hour. New year, new challenges, the shifting landscape of advocacy. So there, I'm kind of wanted, this open hour came from a lot of different directions. Obviously, there's been a lot of changes going on recently in terms of policies and shifts in administration, and lots of things going on locally for different people as well. So the idea for this open hour sort of came from that, and just as a space to sort of share out and allow people to connect and talk about some of the things that are going on, some of the changes that we're seeing or that we might see in the future, and collaborate a little bit about ideas or strategies, things that we're anticipating or things that we're seeing now, and also just hear a little bit about what's going on for everyone in terms of where you're involved in, and if you've heard from other people who have started new chapters or new things based on what's been going on and starting here in 2017. So I'll just open up the floor. I do have some prompt questions we can use if it's simple. But if we want to go first maybe and do a little bit of round robin of where, who we are and where we're coming in from, I think that would be great. So Ashley, I did just hear from you, but you're on my top left-hand corner if you want to say hello and who you are and where you're calling in from.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning for me anyway, in Eugene, Oregon. My name's Ashley. I'm a master's student at the University of Oregon, studying environmental studies. And I attended a public lab sponsored citizen science workshop in Ecuador. But this is my first time actually participating in an open forum, so I'm excited about becoming a more active member. So I'm just kind of in the process right now, just listening and seeing what's going on and the opportunities to potentially plug in, and also potentially being a liaison of things that are emerging here as well.
Great. Liz, are you available to go off mute?
Yes, hi. Really great to see everybody. My name is Liz Barry, and I'm calling in from Brooklyn, New York. And I spent the weekend organizing a large archive-a-thon, which is one in a series of events to back up government environmental data. And we had about 150 people gathered here in New York. So this is an example of like Public Lab partnering with the Environmental Data and Governance Initiative, which is bringing us in contact with a lot of other institutions like libraries and law clinics who also care about data and have other relationships to the way they work on the environment. So it's been busy, but I'm kind of grateful to have timely work to do. That's it.
Great, thanks, Liz. Jeff, you're next on my little lineup here. If you want to do an intro and where you're calling in from and what you're interested in today.
Hi, I'm Jeff. I'm with the Public Lab staff, and I'm just listening in today from Somerville, Massachusetts.
And Chris, hello. You're next on my little lineup here. If you want to say who you are, where you're calling in from, and what you're interested in talking about today here at Open Hour on the topic.
Okay, and what is the specific, what's the phrase of the topic that?
Sure. Yeah, that's okay. It's New Year, New Challenges, the Shifting Landscape of Advocacy.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, wow, okay. I'm Chris Sellers, and I teach at Stony Brook University in New York. I'm working I'm an environmental historian working in history of environmental health in cities, and doing a cross-national comparative project looking at industries in Texas and Mexico. In terms of why I'm here, I guess it's also that I'm really pretty heavily involved in EDGI, the Environmental Data and Governance Initiative. And I guess in terms of challenges, boy, we're facing them. I hope to get a chance to tell you guys a little bit about all that.
Sorry, I was muted there. Renee, I always say your name incorrectly. Can you say it for me?
It's Renata.
Grenada. Thank you so much. Okay, and do you want to tell me where you're calling in from and what brought you to the call today?
Yeah, I'm calling from New Orleans, and here I am. I'm active in several groups, mainly 350 Louisiana, but also with No New Leases, and I'm helping with the Bucket Brigade, and we're organizing against the BioBridge pipeline. So yeah, bunch of projects that I'm active in, and I just and on one hand I see that we are being hit with so many issues. On the other hand, I see that people are becoming really active. When people are calling for events, there are record numbers of people coming out every time, and that's encouraging.
Great, thanks, Renata. Shana, hello, welcome. Can you tell us who you are, where you're calling in from, and what specifically you're interested in chatting about today on the call?
Yeah, my name is Shana Casper. I'm the Vermont State Director with Toxics Action Center. I'm actually calling out of Boston today. We work in all 6 New England states with community groups that are facing pollution threats in their neighborhoods to help provide them with information, networking to experts and other activists, and provide side-by-side community organizing assistance. And what I'm on this call on is really about connecting folks who have been active, because we work with a lot of first-time activists, people who are just getting involved in protecting the air they breathe, the water they drink, because of an issue in their backyard. And now all of a sudden getting a few more people who are calling up or wanting to help out with a lot of folks who have never been politically active before, so wanting to help make those connections.
Great, thank you. And let's see, Kina, are you available to go off mute?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Kenneth Smith. I'm calling in from Fairbanks, Alaska. And what I'm doing up here now is I am working with a kind of a water and tree physiology group at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, building sensors that measure sap flow and water content in birch trees, looking at how the reduced snowpack up here is going to affect the ability for birch trees to continue living. And I got accepted into the Gathering of Open Science Hardware in Santiago, so I'll be headed down there in the end of March.
Great, that's exciting. Gretchen, are you available to go off mute?
Yep. Hi, my name is Gretchen Gurkey, and I work with Public Lab, doing data quality and advocacy. And I'm really interested in this topic because I think that the potential implications of this election on the EPA will have a huge effect on how effective advocacy is done in general, and kind of who the end targets of the advocacy are, in terms of if there are no federal regulators to advocate to, then we need to very much focus on the local and state level. And so I'm very interested in hearing other people's opinions about how to shift advocacy strategies to make sure that it's effective for folks, and also to some extent shifting toward thinking through community interception and remediation, and if that needs to be highlighted, because there won't necessarily be as much enforcement to be targeted.
Great, and where are you calling in from?
Durham, North Carolina.
Thanks. Rebecca Johnson, are you available to say hello and where you're calling in from and what brought you to the call today, what you're interested in?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm calling from, I'm in New York, but I work with groups in the South, specifically in Louisiana, on environmental health. I'm just really interested to hear what you all feel is going to be happening given the EPA, Southern region, as we call it, Southern region EPA is particularly ineffective in addressing the needs of communities. And I work with Mossville Environmental Action now in particular. So, and I found you all on the listserv for Gulf Coast Fund, so I'm happy to be here.
Great, thanks for joining. I also see we have a few people who are calling in on the phone. Not sure who you are because you don't have names on your phone numbers, but can we go through one by one if you're available to say hello, who you are and where you're calling in from and what you're interested in the call?
Hi there. This is Meredith Dowling. I'm one of the folks calling in. I work with Southwings. We have a network of volunteer pilots who fly across the Southeast to help support environmental work of various kinds. And I'm just here to listen and see where I might be able to plug in and help folks.
Great, thanks Meredith. And I heard someone else there as well.
Yeah, hi. This is Alison Parker. I am a fellow hosted by the EPA, and I'm just generally interested in the topic and the thoughts you all have. I work on citizen science and monitoring and things like that. So.
Great, and where are you calling in from, Allison?
From Washington, D.C.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else on the phone?
This is Shana. I'm just calling in on the phone because I have better service that way.
Oh, gotcha. All right, great. Thanks, everyone. I heard a lot of really similar themes, I think, in kind of what brought us to the call today. A couple interesting points maybe we could go through. One is, the challenges that are currently happening and that we're seeing right now. Another point being what people are doing. It seems like there's a lot of really great initiatives going on that are focused a little bit around some of the challenges that we have. Shana, I also heard you mention a little bit about engaging first-time activists, which I think could be an interesting discussion point to share as well. So I was wondering if someone wants to put up a question or idea first in terms of what grabs your ear in this group of people in sharing a conversation.
You mean like using the chat function or something?
I think we could just go on and off mute. Actually, Chris, do you want to, since you sort of spoke up first, do you want to give us a little background on EDGI and the work that's been going on there?
Sure. And just cut me off if I go too long. I'll try to.
No worries.
I mean, gosh. But it started this group with an email sent out to like 15 people, and academic people as well as public lab folks, I understand, in mid-November after the election. And since then, in the last really almost 2 months now, mid-November, even more than 2 months, I guess, we've really built something. It's had a lot of press coverage, especially for this kind of the front end activities we've been involved in. And we're underway with further plans and so on. But all this is kind of anticipating what might happen with a Trump administration. So the first emphasis was on saving data. We organized about 2 months worth of archive-a-thons in various places, starting with Toronto. We developed a way of sort of keeping track of what's being saved so that different archive-a-thons and folks in them don't reduplicate. And so that's really the most developed piece of it. We've now, as we've moved into the new administration, set up a monitoring team for the websites, the environmental websites of the government. and are keeping close tabs on that. And then there's another piece of it that is going to be, we're also doing a lot of interviews. By the way, I'm in Washington now. I'm at the Wilson Center, although that's actually, I'm doing this for the EDGI group, this interviewing. And so we're looking to interview recent retirees, mostly recent, in terms of their insights both into what's going on in the EPA today, and then also their sense of how that relates to earlier experiences, in particular presidential transitions. So we're also looking to track legislation and bills, what's going on in terms of new rules and regulations and these agencies' budgets and so on. And it's a lot of people working on a volunteer basis. I mean, very few of us are actually being paid. We're all doing it because, number one, it's as scholars, many of us, it's something that our skills match. I mean, this is some place where scholars can really step in and just document what's happening and what's going to, as it happens. And so that's a big piece of what we're doing. I guess maybe I better stop and start to open the door to questions before I move. So.
Feel free to ping, anyone can ping in here. This is all loose format.
I mean, so, I mean, with this is way that we sort of, it's a different kind of politics in that I think, we move into kind of a different time warp in terms of the role of science in political advocacy, where it's just basic, professional scientists and their agendas, basic EPA mission, that all of these are kind of under attack. And so it moves us into a different place where just talking about preserving science is an act of advocacy. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, to take up that space. I think the established environmental groups have their own somewhat different shtick, and so this has become our sort of way of inserting ourselves in a new language about what we're doing in advocacy into the discussion. We're saying, facts. We're protecting facts, and so much environmental regulation is just based on what we know about the environment, which is through science and monitoring, all that kind of thing, as many of you guys know. So that's what we need to protect, I think.
Just to loop back in a little bit on Shana's comment, I think I see there's a little parallel here, and I was wondering, Chris, this has been a huge effort. It's taken a lot of people from a lot of different places. What are some of the strategies that you've used to engage some people who are potentially first-time activists? Or I don't know if we're calling these people, everyone activists here in this situation, but people who are working on this as a new project that's suddenly come up from this sort of changing landscape.
Well, I mean, we've because we're sort of kind of dependent on everybody's just volunteering their time and their skills and so on. We try to be really open for that, and as people come along, depending on their interest and the skills they bring to the table, we've tried to make sure that they hook up with the different parts of EDGI that are doing a kind of activity they might be get engaged with. I mean, we've also tried, we tried to sort of formalize that a little bit.
Do you have a billing page on the COCA page, or it's just like, thank you, your info has been submitted? Billing page? You got a bill? I just got a.
I'm sorry, was that what was that? There was a question?
No, I think it was somebody who didn't know that they weren't on mute. So whoever's phone number ends in 3909, I've put you on mute, and you can unmute whenever you're free to join in the call.
But just to finish up that thought about getting first-time volunteers in, you can email me if you're interested in pitching in. I mean, I think we're gearing up to do a number of things. I think the website monitoring, the tracking of legislation, we're getting an initiative up to do that. And there are various other ways, possibly visualization. I mean, it would be great to get somebody who really knows about how to take the facts that we're collecting and allow them to be visualized, make them more engaging for folks. So there's a number of things. There is a form, a Google form online, and on our website you can find it under that's another thing where we need to work on our interface, but it's there, and I can send out the link to it actually.
Great, thank you.
I'd also like to help Chris answer this question and
Sure.
say that there's hi, I'm Liz Barry, and I helped organize the New York City data rescue for EDGI this weekend.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's these guys really, they've gone to town. Go ahead.
So for the EDGI movement, we set up an archiver Slack that already has almost 250 people in it. And anyone can join and be connected with the conversation either by their technical interest or by what city they live in. And I really think what's fueling this movement now is that there's so many people interested in so many cities that the in-person events are rolling and building on each other as tasks get, maybe a new task is understood in one city and then passed off to the group in the next city to work on it and then do the same. So I think it's a really powerful combination that EDGI is working on with massive in-person events combined with like accessible public conversational channels.
Great. Shana, what sort of strategies or things have you been dealing with Toxic Action Center and dealing with engaging people in the first time and things that you guys are thinking about right now?
Yeah, so at Toxic Action Center, we really see our work as being working with often first-time community members who are put in extraordinary situations to help advocate for themselves. And with kind of this new era of all these new people getting agitated and getting involved at this higher level, right, at the national level, then how do we get them involved in local campaigns and in local efforts? Because we see time and time again, that's really how change is going to happen, especially at a time like this. And so, just thinking of some different strategies and really just like tactics of how to get these, because we often work with folks who are working on the first time in their local communities, but of getting people who are working at the first time at the national level also engaged at the local communities. And I see a lot of that is happening by having community groups and community members really just advocating for themselves. So like when there are, protests and rallies and things, getting them up there and getting them, speaking and engaged to be able to share their stories, ready to share their stories, and to have some really, really clear next steps for people to take action on that aren't just, calling into your senator's office or, something really large and kind of, at the high level, but something much more, grassroots that will, make a really big impact. Because we know at the local level, it can only take, 6 or 7 phone calls to policymakers to make a really big change. When at the national level, people are getting, thousands and thousands. But also just having, I think, as you're saying too, what I was, hearing from Liz and from Chris was about helping people have access to information, but also to really own the data and the information. And one thing that we have done is, running a interpreting test results or interpreting data consultation with community groups, because they often get these, stacks of information back when they are running, water or soil tests or whatnot. And instead of just having experts say, here's what this means, instead having it be a conversation and of helping the community group understand and own the data for themselves. So when they ask, what does this mean? Is my water safe to drink? It's really knowing that it's helping them understand that and being able to articulate their campaign and their strategy for themselves, and that includes owning the information.
Great, thank you. We've had a couple new people join in. If people want to do an intro of who they are and where they're calling in from, what they're interested in chatting about. If you'd rather just hang on the line, that's fine as well. All right, Chris, I see you with your hand?
Yeah, I guess that's how I signal that I have a point to make.
That's fine. That works. I can see you. Some people I can't see, but that's what works.
Okay, so I was just going to respond to Shana, right? I think a lot of what we're doing, at least in terms of the tracking and so on, of outside the archiving events are more local events. So that's one way that different local groups, they can organize these events themselves, and there are also a lot that are already online, as Liz said. So I hope we can get that link out to folks at the end so they can, if they're interested in that. The other piece, though, I think, is that it's so important to understand the impacts of whatever changes happen in Washington at the local level. And what we haven't done this at all, but what I would like to see us do eventually, somehow, maybe with some of you guys' help, is to have some kind of local piece to our monitoring, to where we follow. So not just activists in terms of rallies and applying political pressure, but just documenting what's going on in your place in terms of what the EPA is doing. Are they backing off? Are you getting less information from them? Are they less open to talking with? I mean, these kinds of things I think are gonna, all the stuff in Washington is probably gonna, whatever happens is gonna reverberate and have all sorts of impacts on local level, at the local level, that also have their own independent factors working in. And so looking at different regions and the actual local impacts, which I would be really interested in pursuing that.
Yeah, and that actually brings up another point that I think we sort of touched on at the beginning in introductions, and I think, Renata, I'm going to point to you in a second, but one of the things that we've brought up here, and I've also just been seeing and hearing maybe others as well, is the real struggle on the local level to bring up and highlight all these fast-track environmental projects, environmental degradation projects that are coming down the line right now. And Renata mentioned one here, also down in New Orleans, that we have going on is the Bayou Bridge pipeline. And there are other pipelines that are, being put back on the docket that were potentially on hold. And I was wondering if people could speak a little bit to local level advocacy that has happened in your place, and changes and things that you've seen now and potentially here in the future.
Okay. I can't compare changes with the Bayou Bridge pipeline yet. I just wanted to comment on something Christopher just mentioned. I did observe that right after the inauguration, it was impossible for me to register for 2 EPA webinars. For one, I got the message, it's full, and which has never happened before. And the other one was that I couldn't register. It's something that's scheduled for later in February, and all I can do is go straight to the site. But if there is no webinar happening yet, there's no point. So that has definitely changed, and I'm wondering if other people have had similar experiences, and where to report instances like that we observe. And the other thing with Bayou Bridge, actually we've had success that we were granted hearings here, but it remains to be seen what happens from now on. And I mean, hearings is they can always listen to what people say, and it doesn't have to have any consequence. But I see that the company, Energy Transfer Partners, is really going all out advertising for their project. So they are definitely scared to see our resistance or concerned. Okay.
Great, thank you.
This is Shana again. I would just say we're seeing some pretty similar experiences of just both the pushback from the industries that are trying to push some of these fast track some of these proposals, as well as just enormous response by community groups. There may be a little bit of hopelessness now and then, but that also just people are really standing up and fighting back, which is great.
Is anyone seeing more advocacy directed toward, or even a historical perspective, when EPA has been kind of crunched before in the the Reagan administration and whatnot, or well, actually in the George W. Bush administration too, but of people targeting their advocacy more like directly at local government to pass different ordinances, or to industry to be better neighbors, rather than kind of trying to appeal to to a state DEQ or to the EPA for better enforcement. Has anyone seen that as a trend?
I know we also have a couple people on the phone, so feel free to, anyone, speak up.
The only example that I'm thinking of is not really coming from that perspective, but from more the agriculture and pesticides perspective, is when community groups were beginning to, organize against pesticides spraying in local communities, that the industry fought back really hard and really fast, and they were able to pass a whole bunch of statewide policies to restrict these local pesticide ordinances, except for in 7 states. And so really wanting to make sure that there is local organizing in a kind of more in a statewide effort as well. I'm not sure if that made any sense. I got a little distracted here.
Rebecca, I was wondering, I feel like you would have an interesting perspective here, working with law and in the Gulf Coast as well. If you have thoughts on this in terms of what level should people, have people historically done, and then should we potentially focus our attentions on? And you're on mute. Sorry, I'm not sure if you're aware. If you want to unmute.
Yes, please. Oh, sorry. Let me just my fax number. There's yours.
So it looks like she's not available right now. Anyone else?
I mean, just in terms of the historical perspective, I can offer a little bit. I mean, in the Reagan administration is probably the closest thing comparable to what we are seeing. We'll see massive assault on EPA, a person appointed to EPA that was sort of against the very mission of the agency, massive budget cuts proposed, and I believe they shrunk the budget, like the personnel by a third or something like that. But at that time, that was also the peak organizing moment, those early years in the 80s, for groups like Sierra Club, and all the environmental groups actually saw a great boom, both in what they could do and the members and all this kind of thing. And so, it may already be happening now with this particular, things happen a little faster, I think, given all the communication tools in this day and age. And that, I think, is a hopeful history and legacy.
Yeah, I had a question about how, I saw this HR 861 bill introduced by the representative from Florida that is literally just titled Terminate the EPA. Right. And see that it's being bounced around like a hot potato to different congressional committees, trying to figure out who has jurisdiction to even think about that. But actually, does anyone know how to think about that? Is this at all is this just a giant trolling thing, or is this like, anyways, I'll go back on mute now.
I mean, I don't want to say that anything is off the table given the 20 executive orders that we've seen in the first 10 days of Trump's administration, and the composition of our current Congress. But I think it's a massive trolling effort. I can't imagine that would pass. Especially, if you even just want to look at the jobs aspect, and everyone talking about trying to save coal country and save 2,000 jobs, and the EPA employs 15,000 federal employees plus possibly equal that contractors. So just even from that perspective, I think that places like North Carolina would be up in arms because we have the largest research center here. So I think it's a massive trolling effort.
Chris?
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. I think that it's kind of a symbolic politics. The thing is, though, in the Reagan administration, right after they built these laws and agencies and so on, and that was the 70s, they tried to do a similar thing, really almost to get rid of the EPA, and they couldn't do it then. Now it's harder, not because the EPA is that much bigger. It's actually not. It's actually peak year of personnel was 1989, but there are decades more court decisions. And it's going to be so hard. They have to change the legislation and roll back pieces of Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, all these basic laws that now have all these rules that implement them that have accumulated over decades. And so it's a little bit of a pipe. It is very much a pipe dream because they have to keep regulating. They can't just abrogate those laws. Otherwise, the court suits will abound, and the courts will hold. I think the courts will defend all these precedents, most of these precedents.
Rebecca, are you available now? Are you back on the line?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, great.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. There was a question floating around a minute ago about the different levels of government and what we've seen in the past versus maybe what's happening now. And I was wondering if you could share some insights a little bit from your experience working in the Gulf Coast and in law about the local level advocacy efforts versus putting efforts into state or national level policies and advocacy.
I'll try. First of all, I'm not a lawyer, but I work with a lot of groups who use legal strategies and have
Gotcha.
lawsuits. And it's my impression over the last 10 years that lawsuits are pretty ineffective. Industry has totally, and I'm talking about oil and gas and chemical processing industries, know totally how to stall those. Local judiciaries are pretty unwilling to consider community claims. So, for example, with Mossville, since they started with legal actions, locally they've only won once since the middle 1990s. So in Louisiana, those of you from Louisiana know it's called a police jury. So the county, our equivalent everywhere else of counties, are very focused on maintaining the tax base because the state has given, the state of Louisiana back in 1934 or something, gave all oil, gas, and chemical processors tax exemption. So they don't pay state taxes. They do pay to the local jurisdictions. So all of that combines to make it very, very difficult to resist anything that oil industry wants to do. So the work in Mossville right now, Mosul will become the 5th community to be kind of removed, and this time it's by Sasol, the South African oil company. And the strategy locally is pretty ineffective. There's now a Democratic governor, so we feel like that's where any community advocacy for relief from this relocation would have to go. The thing, because I'm sort of really focused now on companies, on these big producers dislocating whole communities, I'm interested in law schools and other scholars looking at the voluntary property purchase programs that the chemical processors, oil and gas producers use as a way of getting agreement from these very, overburdened and sick communities, sick in that everybody is suffering from the industrial toxins. So, and then EPA regions vary from region to region, and I think, Gulf Coast, the region in Dallas, Region 6, is incredibly ineffective. So, and, I don't know that there's such a big difference between now and when Bush was president with that region. And ATSDRs, we stopped talking to them about 5 years ago because it was just made people feel like they were insane. So, so to me, the most effective has been regional work and really trying to embarrass the companies directly. So really good social media is really important. The minute that means 2016 MLK, Reclaim MLK Day action showed up on the Black Lives Matter site, Sasol knew about it. They were wondering how this was happening, and they were afraid, or at least worried. And so I think how we do regional campaigns that have both turning out people and social media presence is really important. And then I think I'll stop there.
Great, thank you so much.
This is Shana again from Tax Action Center. I just want to highlight on something that you said there of just how to get the word out about these different campaigns and the role of, new media as well as, just traditional media and traditional ways of getting the word out about various actions and campaigns. In particular around the EDGI program in particular, I just had not heard of this until November 10th or so. And now it is just everywhere. So I would love it if you guys could just share a little bit about how you guys have been getting the word out about this campaign and about the work that you've been doing. I didn't know that this program existed. Maybe it didn't. And now it looks like we're going to have a workshop at our local environmental action conference on March 5th to help folks be able to nail it down. So I'm really excited about that. I want to invite everyone to it, but also would love to hear a little bit more about how you're getting the word out.
Liz, you want to talk, or you wanted me to?
I was hoping you could talk about the Canadians.
Yeah,
the Canadians. Here we go.
Well, I think a part of it. The first event was in Toronto, and Michelle Murphy and some folks there at her university, including a lot of technically sophisticated, really skilled and able folks in that realm, held the first event. And that actually, it was the first of its kind, I think. They called it an archive-a-thon, a hackathon. I guess there was a little controversy about the label with hack.
Guerrilla archiving?
With the guerrilla archiving, that's what I was going to say. That packaging was, I think, important. And the way we've gotten the word out is we've not done it. It's been the journalists. This is kind of, and so it's been a little miraculous how they picked up on that. I think it was something about the moment with the Trump election and everybody talking about post-factual and all this that really piqued their interest. And once you get one journalist doing this, they're a little like lemmings. I don't know. but they really do pile on, and that's kind of what happened with the archiving events. And we've had a little bit of that start to happen. So we haven't really worked on our, this is one of the things I'm trying to get us to focus on this, our public sort of presentation of ourselves as opposed to what the journalists say about us. And they've gotten a bunch of stuff wrong. I mean, we've seen that too. So we did have this report we put out about that was our interpretation of what we did and so on. And that is available. I'll put a link to it up here so you can see our take on what we've done. And, some of that, we're starting to go public with the interviewing part of it now. And I think because it sort of got attached to this story that the journalists now have about scientists taking action, this movement of the scientists. We're not all, a lot of us are social scientists, or I'm an historian, but that's the sort of peg that we're on now. And so they've got, actually, the New York Times is coming to witness or to take pictures of an interview I'm doing this afternoon. They're doing a profile piece end of next week on Edgy. So it's pretty wild. I've never been involved in fights like that.
Chris, let me give some other background information. And Gretchen, feel free to interrupt me because I haven't been involved in Edgy as long as either Gretchen or Chris, nor as deeply.
Yeah.
So November 10th, the United States wasn't ready for the attack on science, but Canada was. Because in 2013, the Harper regime literally had a Fahrenheit 451 event when they shut down libraries full of undigitized scientific research dating back centuries, loaded books into dumpsters, and sent them to incinerators. They burned science libraries. And this is a terrible thing, but what it's meant for the Edgy movement, as you all now are hearing about it cropping up everywhere, this has been growing for years, and awareness broadly in the collegial science and historian community that this kind of thing is possible. So a lot of people were ready when the election results came in the United States.
And especially in Toronto, that whole team just fell together, I think.
Well,
that's a good point, really good point.
Michelle Murphy was a leader of the resistance in the Canadian under the Harper regime. They kind of fought back, and she was in that, and she's one of the other founding members of Edgy. And I just want to say something that we haven't talked a whole lot about that Chris mentioned briefly in his intro of Edgy is the website monitoring, and I'm part of that. There's a team of 5 of us that are monitoring 25,000 URLs, and that we selected that are a lot of them are EPA, a lot of them are in NASA and NOAA and DOE, and not nearly enough in BLM or OSHA or USGS. But so we've been watching. So in addition to the archiving events that are taking data sets and making sure that those data sets are preserved and that they have integrity such that scientists could continue to use those data sets. We are also looking at the public presentation of information via websites and seeing how, kind of what could be considered just small scale language changes that actually add up to a big picture, or, pages being removed, or, key links being removed, those sorts of things. And so we haven't been doing a great job at public dissemination yet. Right now we make reports on changes that we think are significant and then send them to specific journalists. And so we've had, we've written 8 reports, and I think 6 of them are out the door already. But the plan is to make more of a weekly digest and make that publicly available via our website. And the idea is to provide context about what these kind of changes are in terms of, and then showing specific changes. And then at the end, we'll be accumulating all this information and be able to integrate into our 100 days report, of which will be a report of what are all the things we've seen in the first 100 days of the Trump administration. Be able to synthesize that a bit better, or a lot better, into kind of if there's a cohesive story about what's going on. But the goal is we just haven't had the manpower to really think about the public face as much as we would like, but that is definitely an end goal.
And that's where volunteers come in. Come help us.
I want to take sorry, go ahead.
No, this is going back to, the first time activism kind of prompt here too is, we had a PhD student once upon a time do interviews with folks who had, kind of taken action for the first time. And I feel like this would be something really interesting to interview people who have been doing these interviews and have been doing these scientists who've been doing the archiving, or the historians who've been doing the archiving, to see how being part of this type of process is helping them identify as an activist, or to get them to take further action down the line. I feel like there really could be something there. It'd be amazing.
I completely agree. That's something I was just thinking about over the weekend, is seeing how, because so many, as Chris said, when I saw the word activist, that EDGI was referred to as a group of activists, I totally was taken aback. We're not activists. and then was like, well, maybe we are. We're taking action.
Yeah.
To think through, or to kind of talk with folks about how, scientists are not the ones that made science politicized. That just happened. That was thanks to politicians. And so now that has happened, are scientists seeing themselves transform at all, and potentially more interested in civic engagement than there used to be? And there's this whole 314 action that's helping scientists run for social, or for office, to become civil servants, and that's the whole purpose of the organization, which I think is really, really fascinating.
So really cool. And we also have a database of scientists and experts who'd be interested in helping community groups. And so I'll link that into here as well. Hoping that some of those of you guys and some of the other folks you're involved in might be willing to continue to stay involved and help community groups down the line.
So we have about 7 minutes left in the schedule call, and I will always leave it open, but I did want to pose one other question out here while everyone's here as a group. We've talked a good bit about the data that's out there and exists, and we've also touched a little bit on holding companies accountable, but I do want to circle back to the idea of other methods or strategies that people have seen or are thinking about now with this changing advocacy landscape. And I guess one of the things that's coming to mind immediately is, we're talking a little bit about, exposing the data. We've talked a bit about exposing, like Rebecca has mentioned, holding companies accountable directly and speaking to them directly, and exposing facts. But I'm also thinking a little bit about something that was really prevalent in the campaigns leading up to the election, which was there was a lot of talk about exposing the money and where the money was coming from and where the money was going and who, the money in the politics and in advocacy. And also, one of the things that we've historically held on to as environmental groups is actually holding on to and exposing the illness and the things that happen to people when polluters come into town. And I'm wondering if anyone has heard or thought about people who have taken those strategies and sort of grabbed them as well, or others that are on the line here too, here and sort of what's coming along as the changes that we've seen recently.
There is a website called Follow the Money, and I'd seen it tossed around. I haven't actually done any digging into it, but there's actually a website dedicated to that, which I think is pretty awesome.
This is Rebecca. Monique Carden, who does a lot of work for environmental justice groups, has theorized a new approach to the health question, because EPA regulation doesn't actually protect health, and in the way that we think about people getting sick, an ATSDR is reluctant to acknowledge that people are sick. So, the onus of proving illness that being on the EJ groups is backwards. And I'm not sure if Monique has published this anywhere. She came to Sarah Lawrence College where I teach and did a talk. So sort of a new paradigm for the relationship of regulation, public health regulation to environmental illnesses. So, but I think she's right in that we have it kind of ass backwards, and need to come up with accountability measures that force industry to prove they're not hurting people, as opposed to people proving that their illness has come from industrial toxins.
Want to say something?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, the Louisiana Bucket Brigade here in New Orleans is, they are open to receive phone calls from residents. And I've read scripts of calls that came in that describe how they smell a strong odor and experience dizziness or low nosebleed, headaches. And those are residents who live in immediate vicinity of petrochemical plants. But then, and they report knowing so many people who die who are sick from very rare cancers and stuff. So there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but again, yeah. So that's what I know. It's definitely happening, and it's bad. But I don't know how far they are being supported by government agencies. I don't think so.
Well, and we heard stories, and it's more than anecdotal. We did a random sample door-to-door survey of a community health needs assessment in Mossville, and we documented diagnoses that are higher than average across 10 illnesses. But the public health department in Louisiana barely exists and does not care. And
right.
The state gave Sasol over $100 million to relocate Mossville. The state gave them money to dislocate the community. So, Louisiana is unlike any other state in its sort of disregard for the health and welfare of people in relationship to plants, So, but it's fighting those extreme examples that will give information to everybody else on how to resist states that might care more about their citizens.
Yeah, and on top of that, Louisiana is the state that gives the most subsidies of any state to large corporations. It's absolutely off the chart how Louisiana subsidizes huge corporations and has at the same time a huge budget deficit, cutting programs to the bone.
We've reached the top of the hour, and I'm just going to cut in for just a second and say thank you so much for everyone who's joined and called on. I'll leave the line open for anyone who wants to stay and continue some of the things we've talked about, or bring up something that hasn't been brought up yet. But thank you so much, everyone who's called in, and this will be archived on the OpenHour archive page as well.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, as well.
if we're good here and no one has anything else, I'll go ahead and call it. Anyone last minute? I'll share the link. I'll grab the links as well, and they'll go on the archive. Okay. Thank you.
Great, thanks.